Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan, guys. Today we are going to talk about ambition, stagnation, and contrast how these things come together. Okay, on the one hand, you find that some people tend to lack ambition, and in their lack of ambition, you find that they stagnate. So, for example, you might find somebody, they appear to be very contented, they sort of hanging around, things are chilled out, everything's all good, and you come back 10 years later and they're hanging around, things are all chilled out, and they're still good, but they haven't done anything. They haven't accomplished anything with their lives, and there is a certain amount of misery that goes with the idea of not accomplishing anything in your life. Okay, then you find other people, they always very busy, they doing a lot, they running around, they stressed out, and they just don't seem to be contented at all with anything. Okay, they're always trying to improve, they're always trying to better themselves, not only themselves, the environment, and it's just impossible to try to keep up with them. You find that lot, okay? And what I want to look at today is how do you find the balance between these two extremes? Okay, on the one hand, extreme complacency, on the other hand, being dangerously ambitious. Okay, why would ambition be dangerous? So these are the two things I want to contrast for you, and then we're gonna try to find the middle ground. Okay, here today in this talk with me, Coach the Brains. Right. First of all, let us look at complacency. Okay, what is the impetus towards complacency? Okay, why people sort of just don't really want to do things. One of the major setbacks for people when they do become complacent is disappointments that they have experienced in their lives. So they tell themselves, you know what, I don't really want to try anything because I'm not gonna succeed anyway if I try things now. Okay? However, then when things do come up for them, for example, somebody comes up with an idea and says, hey, why didn't you do this, or why didn't you do that, or let us do this or that, you will find they always come up with a lot of excuses. So they will say, you know what, no, it's not going to work because XYZ. So they're very good at coming up with why things don't work. They tend to veer towards pessimism almost, okay? Because of this pessimism, they become extremely complacent. However, then you find people on the other end, people who are very, very ambitious, constantly trying new things, and always really busy, but also at the same time extremely unhappy because they can never do enough. Okay? So before we continue, I'm going to pause here and I'm going to ask you, which type are you? Where do you veer towards? Do you veer towards pessimism and complacency, or do you veer towards optimism but also a strong sense of discontent? Not that these have to go together or they're mutually exclusive, but for the sake of this paradigm, let us do it in this particular way. So which are you? Think about it for a minute. Right? Think about it and hold that in your mind, okay? So if you veer towards pessimism, if you veer towards thinking things won't work out for you, okay? And that causes you not to try to begin with. So how would you overcome that? Do you need to overcome that firstly? Okay, so let us first look at that. Frankly, accomplishment or lack thereof, right, does contribute to people's self-image, how they view themselves. So people who accomplish things in their lives tend to view themselves in a more positive way. When they view themselves in a more positive way, they also manage to have the necessary confidence to do more things. So in other words, it's almost like you get the ball rolling. So you do one thing, you accomplish it, and then that encourages you, sort of gives you the momentum to do another thing. You accomplish that, and then you feel like that has given you momentum to continue, and so on and so forth. And so it's like an upward spiral. The more things you do, the more things you can do. Okay, so there's that. So if you're on the other end of the spectrum, you sort of telling yourself, you know what, I can't do it because I failed. It's very difficult to get out of the failing rut. Okay, you will tell yourself, I failed, and then I'm going to fail again, and then you do something, you try something, but not fully committed, not all hands on deck, right? And you fail inevitably again, and you tell people, you see, I told you it wouldn't work. Look, you the one that encouraged me to do this, and I told you it wouldn't work, and it didn't work, and I should never have listened to you, okay? Type of thing. So there's that, and it becomes one disaster after the next disaster, and eventually you just decide, you know what, I'm not going to do anything. Okay, life is just fine the way it is. Why bother with all of this anyway? So there is that type of scenario. Okay, so where do we draw the line? How do we find the balance? Should we find the balance? Okay, yes, we need a balance between these two things, because on the one hand, the person who is overly ambitious suffers from burnout, also tends to define himself or herself in terms of accomplishments. This tends to be more a man thing a lot of the time, because males tend to define themselves outwardly, project themselves outwardly into the world as a series of accomplishments. Okay, women, and this is a generalization, of course, not all men are that way, and not all women are the way that I'm about to describe now. But women tend to project themselves inwardly, and so find their value and self-worth based on their inward perception, meaning outside looking in. Okay, so you will find that women tend to care a lot more about what others think of them. Their self-image relates a lot to the outside looking in. Men's self-image relates to the inside looking out, projecting yourself out. How much can you project yourself out there? Can you project your will? Can you accomplish, subjugate, in a way, nature and its elements and the world and so on, and assert masculinity? So there are those types of things also that run in line with our discussion today. But we're not going to sort of genderize this talk too much, though genderizing anything these days comes across as being typically offensive. We're veered towards a discourse that aims to be more or less gender neutral, which comes with its own problems, of course, because then we don't acknowledge gender specific traits, and also gender specific I could say the psychology that relates specifically more or less to different genders. We tend to dismiss that, and that's unfortunate. But let us continue with the issue at hand. So how do you jump out of that pessimism cycle? All right. Okay, so let's look at that. So you're the pessimist. How do you jump out of that pessimist cycle? How do you stop being complacent? How do you start accomplishing things? The way initially is to set yourself small tasks. Set yourself small tasks, goals that are manageable, where you would be able to get to that point, right? More likely than less likely. Okay, so more likely accomplishable goals. So you set yourself a small goal, not something that's, scares you, and then you accomplish it. You do it, you accomplish it, you tick it off. You set yourself another goal slightly bigger, you do it, you accomplish it, you tick it off. You will notice when you do this, after several little goals have been accomplished, you start to develop greater confidence in your ability to accomplish tasks that you set your mind to. Okay? So to break out the pessimism cycle, to break out of that complacency or the rut that you feel stuck in, you need to make these little adjustments to your life. Okay? You can try to also, I've noticed with a lot of people who tend not to accomplish much in life, who tend to be on the complacent side, they also tend to also be rather ill-disciplined in their general lives. So what you could do is create a few anchor points in your life. Like, for example, go to bed at the same time every night. Okay, create a pattern of stability around a few basic habits, okay, that will anchor you and give you a sense of stability in your life. Very importantly, okay, it's very important for people to feel a sense of stability in their lives. It is why often people who come from the middle class or upper middle class or wealthier classes of society tend to accomplish more in general. Okay, you do get people who accomplish a great deal, who come from very, very desperate backgrounds, out of sheer will and good luck, of course. But in general, people who have the insulation of wealth and stability tend to fare better in the worldly sense, in the sense of accomplishments. Okay, so you need to create that stability for yourself through small habits. Okay, you could develop a habit of cleanliness, keeping your place tidy. You could develop a habit of setting a routine, for example, to read for 1 hour every day, build up your knowledge base. Very important to build up your knowledge base, and so on and so forth. And you'll find yourself moving out of that pessimism. You'll find yourself moving towards non-complacency, towards accomplishing things, because the more you engage, the more you want to engage. The more you engage with accomplishment and success, it puts you on a natural high, and so the more you want to engage, the more you become addicted to success, so to say, and then it becomes dangerous. So this is where the opposite needs to be tampered down a bit, right? So here you are, you've become addicted to success. You've gained one success after the next, okay, and you become the chronic optimist, the one on the other side. You become the person that can't sit still, that can't stop working, that is addicted to achievement, right? That's also very unhealthy. Okay, people like that become incredibly miserable and depressed because they've become used to a high that is based off of achievement, which means that they don't feel like they can slow down. Okay? Because if they slow down, they're not going to experience that high, and that high requires greater and greater success constantly, and so it becomes like a drug. And so therein lies the danger. So how to mitigate that problem on the flip side? So one thing that you can do, if this is you, if you are the chronic optimist, if you are just filled with ambition and success and you need to accomplish one thing after the next, what you need to do is you need to step back from it, from yourself. You need to take a break, my friend. Okay? And you need to tell yourself that you are not your accomplishments. Okay? The things you do is what you do. It's not who you are. You are not your accomplishments, and you need to slow down and look around you and start appreciating the simple things in life. Okay? So you look at your life and say, you know what, my life is a good life. I have everything I need and I'm fine. And you need to do that because you need to separate yourself from your accomplishments. You are not your accomplishments. So you need to go through that sort of detox, so that you can once again feel those highs in the same way you felt them in the beginning when you climb the ladder that you are trying to climb, or when you are achieving your ambitions. Okay? Because it's like when you sit down at the bottom of the ladder and you are, let's use a career for example, you are just a maintenance technician. Okay? You look up at the engineers on top, on top of you anyway, and you're like, I wish I could be an engineer. And after a few years of being a maintenance technician, doing the odd this and that, you become an engineer, right? And you're an engineer and you look up and you look at someone and you're like, I wish I could be the chief engineer. After a few years, you become that. You never look down again and say, hey, you know what? I was just a technician, a maintenance technician a few years back. You're always looking for the next thing, and you will always look for the next thing. Okay, that's the problem with ambition. Okay, and looking for the next thing and achieving the next thing is not in itself the problem. It's the things you mentally attach to that. Okay, you attribute the success of your actions that your actions have wrought to your self-worth. Now you can't help, I've just said to begin with that does make you feel more worthy, right? And it does that invariably, but you need to remind yourself that you are not your job, or you are not your accomplishments. Because the flip side happens also. It's when you start failing, right? You are not able to handle the idea of failure because you're not used to failing, you're used to winning. Okay, so you become extremely depressed and you're not able to handle failure, and you can't see yourself starting from ground zero yet again, especially when it takes you a good couple of years to climb up the ladder, right? And so there's that. And then to tie these things together, I would say what a good realization would be for you and I is to know that there are a pair of siblings, twins, I call them the twins, right? That can't be separated in this world. Like you can separate a man and a wife, you can separate friends, you can separate so many things, but these are twins that are inseparable. Okay, and who are these twins? These that are inseparable. They are joy, pleasure, and pain. Pleasure and pain. They are twins. You can't separate them. Okay? They are success and failure. They are twins. You cannot separate them. Okay? They are experiencing joy and grief. They are twins. You cannot separate them. And what does it mean? Well, it means simply, guys, what goes up must come down. Okay? If you're climbing the ladder, right, at some point you're going to fall down the ladder. Okay? It's a risk you take when you climb it anyway. Okay? If you love, for example, you love somebody, at some point there's going to be the separation, and that might be that will be painful invariably, whether it's separation in life or separation in death. There's going to be that. Okay, if you experience great pleasure, right, at some point you're going to experience sorrow or pain, okay? And so such is the nature of life. And if we embrace these things together, remember I said you cannot separate them. They are the twins, okay? So many women long, for example, to have a child. It's an innate instinct of a lot of women, not all women, but so many of them, so many women want a child. But how does a child come into this world? Through pleasure and pain. Okay, through pleasure and pain. Okay, it's pleasurable to be sexually intimate with your spouse, but also it's painful to have to deliver this child into the world for the mother. It's extremely painful, but when she sees that child for the first time, then the joy that she experiences is inexplicable. And suddenly the pain is forgotten, at least momentarily, okay? Until you start mentioning that possibly you'd like more children, then she might actually recall how painful that was. Anyway, so the point is, these things go together. Okay, these are the twins. And so with pessimism and optimism, okay, you need to be able to cycle through various states, okay? You can't just be on a roll, because you're not just going to be on a roll. You can't just be achieving one thing after the next, and think that it's never going to end for you, okay? Or that you're never going to fail. You're always going to fail. There's going to be a failure invariably one way or another, okay? Unless you Khabib Nurmagomedov, in which case, you know, he hasn't lost a single fight. But anyway, that's a different story, right? But ultimately, guys, what I'm saying is that strive so as to accomplish things in your life, but don't forget that failure could be around the corner, okay? And also, if you are stuck in your life, start one step at a time. And to end off with, I will end off with a famous saying of the noble Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be on him, where he said, the little you do every day is much better than doing a lot all at once. So I leave you with that. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.